It is a beautiful morning in the mountains of southern Appalachia. Actually, it's a wet morning. We got rain during the night. Not a whole lot of rain, but at least some, and me and Matt will take anything we can get. So we're really excited that it rained at least a little bit. I always say maybe that's priming the pump. That hadn't necessarily been true this summer, but maybe this is a change, and even if it's not, we'll take that rain. It really will help, I know. So I'm going to walk around this morning and show you how our gardens are progressing, even with the dry weather that we've had. And I'm going to start, I don't think in this year at all that I've showed any of the raised beds up on the bank. That's where I'm standing today. This morning, it's amazing when you look back behind us how much growth has happened. If you missed that, let's see, not last winter, but the winter before, we had Thomas, one of our friends, come and cut this bank back. We have to do that ever since we've lived here. That's something, a chore that has to be done ever so often. So this summer, though, you can really see how much of it's grown back, and we'll be doing it again soon. So in this bed, this is where we planted some of the beans that we're trying out this year. On the left there is the painted pony, and then on the right is the yellow eye bean. So we're really excited, both bush beans, to see how these do for us. You can see they're looking pretty good. Some of the little plants are bigger than others, and then up here in this end, for some reason, the yellow eye, these on this end didn't come up at all. But I hope that we get enough to at least try and then see if it's something that we want to grow again. In this bed, it's a smaller bed. That other one that's so large where the beans were, Matt put two beds together to make it that long, or didn't really put two beds together. I can't really explain it, but he used parts from one bed to enlarge that one, if that makes sense. And then some of them are smaller like this one. And these look really, really great. This is our sweet potatoes that we planted this year. We've not planted sweet potatoes in years, many years ago, and the only reason I planted them then was my Uncle Henry gave me some slips. So I'm excited to see how these do for us. And most of these, I can't remember now it's terrible that my memory's that bad, but I think most of these are the white variety. I was really excited about trying to grow them. White sweet potatoes are my favorite. You can see right there's a tomato plant, a volunteer coming up right in the middle of them. I guess I'll just leave it. Matt knows about that. He'll come up here and pull it out because it'll just turn into entanglement. But they look really good so far. In this little bed, we have our Mississippi pink eyes. We've been growing them for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and we really enjoy them. It's a bush variety of a pea. I see some out there on the other end that's beginning to run. So hopefully before long, we'll have peas. In these last 2 beds here, this is where we had our garlic, and you can see it has really died back. It's really ready for us to harvest, but we've not done that. And I'm worried about it just because it has been so dry, whether or not the bulbs on the end will be very large or not. But either way, we can't control the weather like Matt says, and we'll just have to pull them up to find out how good they did, or if they didn't do so great this year. I'm excited about this bed. I worked on it last weekend, even though it was so hot. I just got out here really early and pushed through and got this flower bed weeded out. I had started on it probably a month ago and left my bag of weeds that I was using. I had a grow bag I was using to put the weeds in, and just left it sitting where it was at and never come back to it. So I finally got it done. And it looks so much better, even if it just stays like this. I got a lot of the anemones out that had about took over. You can see I've still got plenty of them, though, right there. But I was excited to cut everything back a lot of the things had just got so leggy, they had fallen over. And then, of course, I couldn't resist. I planted a lot of flowers in here, just flower seeds, some zinnias, some bachelor buttons, some other things. So we'll see if it comes up or not. I've been trying to keep it moist in the hopes that it will. And you can see you might be able to see some of the poppy stems laying there. Those were Katie's poppies from the backyard. I broke a couple of them off and brought them up here and threw them down, thinking even if they don't come up this year, maybe they'll come up here next year. That's one of my favorite ways to spread flowers around the yard, is just to break off the seed pod and throw it down where I want it to grow, and usually that works. This is the watermelons that we have in the grow bag. You can see right there's 2 pretty big ones. Not really, but I guess one of them's a little bit bigger than a softball. One of them's about like a softball. but hopefully they'll continue to grow. Since this grow bag is so close to the back door at the kitchen, I've really tried to keep it watered, and I think that's why it's doing, at least it, lush. It looks lush and good. But one evening this week, I was coming by and just kind of pet it and talked to it a little bit, and what did I notice on it? A lot of squash bugs. So I went and got my pepper spray and give it a good soaking with that. And I've not seen too many since then on it, so that's something when I make my rounds with my pepper spray, I definitely need to remember to do the watermelon too. The greasy beans that we have right here on this little trellis on part of this cattle panel, they're doing pretty good. Matt and I picked, we probably didn't get more than 2 handfuls of them or something like that last week when we did our major first bean picking of the rattlesnake beans. So we probably got about a good handful, maybe 2 handfuls over here. Greasy beans are slower to produce than the rattlesnake, so that's probably why. But the bean, as far as the plants, they look really good. So I hope they'll continue to produce a little bit for us. And as the summer goes on and they get more established, hopefully they'll have a real flush, more like the rattlesnake beans do. On the other end of the cattle panel here where the beans were at, we have these grapevines. They're Reliance. Reliance is the variety. It's funny, there's a bean vine that's grew up that side of the grapevine. But this is they've been here for a couple of years, and this is the first year they've actually got grapes on them. They don't look like they're doing as good as our grapes, our established grapes down there. Now maybe that's they don't like where they're at, or maybe it's because they're newer grapevines. But I'm excited to actually try the grapes this year and see if we like them as much as we do our others. Our tame blackberries have been producing pretty good for us. I've been picking them just a little bit at a time, and I've made jelly once. I usually pick these, and then I go around the yard and pick all the wild ones too while I'm at it. Not as many wild ones, it doesn't seem like this year. I think the dryness has really hurt them. And these, like I said, ours are doing good right here, but the ones that are growing down at Corey and Austin's that my brother Steve planted, they were just loaded. And they are more of a wild variety. They have thorns. These are thornless, but they were just completely loaded. I couldn't believe how many berries was on them, but now they've just dried up. I mean, there's just not any. There's not one ripe one. It was just strange, and I know it was probably the dryness, I guess, that made them do that, but it was like they all were loaded and kind of pale and white, and then they dried up. That was it. They didn't get ripe at all. But at least these up here at our house have done good this year. When we planted them up here, we planted them, of course, to grow up on the trellis, but what's happened is they've reseeded themselves, and you can see over here, they've completely took over the walkway there. So I don't know, I guess this winter maybe I should try to dig those up and put them back over here where they belong. But they do have berries on them. You just have to kind of dig around down there and find them. These last 2 raised beds that we have up here, they're the only ones that we have the cattle panels on. And in this first one, you can see there's nothing growing in it, nothing. Well, there is, that's telling a story. Right there is a morning glory growing, a wild morning glory, but nothing else growing in them. I planted the Cherokee pole bean that Debbie shared with us in here, and not one bean come up. So I don't know if the seed was bad, if it was too dry, if something ate them. I'm just not sure what happened. And I wanted to replant them. Maybe I could do that this week now that we've got a little bit of rain. But I was just thinking, it's so dry. Is there any point in wasting more seed? I've got. Since this is still the early July, I've got time, if I did plant them and they did grow, to actually produce beans before cold weather arrived. In this farther one, what we planted in it was the Holstein pea, again from Debbie. We grew a few of those last year and really liked them. They have a taste like, similar to black-eyed peas, I would say. And you can see they're beginning to reach up to the cattle panel there and starting to run. So I'm hopeful that we'll have a good production there, even though we don't have very many plants. That is more plants than we had last year. Our garden area back here is probably doing the best of all of our garden areas. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. One is that I've planted a lot of flowers back here, and Matt and I have had to water them to keep them more established. Well, get them going in the first place. When you first plant something, you need to water it to make sure it survives. And then also, since we're back here, you know, it's easier just to say, well, okay, I'll just spray some water in here and in there, whatever. So we've done that. But also, I think because it's the part of our garden that don't get as much sun, so that the evening sun, it does hit the house, the end of the house where my flower bed is, that I'm always complaining about trying to grow something in it. But the rest of this part right here is kind of shaded by those trees. So it gets enough sun to grow stuff, but not enough to just be baking all day long like the front part of our garden and definitely the big garden. So I think that's the reasons why it's doing better. But everything is really lush and nice back here. Now the cucumbers, they're doing better than they did last year and probably even the year before because of the squash bugs, the pepper spray that I've been using, and I will put that link in the description below. But there's all kinds of pepper spray recipes. You could just do a search and find them, but I'll put the one that I've been using. I think that's definitely helped. So that's probably why they're doing better in that way, why I would say. But then as far as their vigorous growth, they've not grew as much as, like usually by this point they're up on top of the cattle panel arch that Matt made, and they're not yet this year. I have been getting cucumbers though, so I can't complain about that. And the squash bugs, I think I'm just learning about the pepper spray, so I was doing it pretty much every day. And then I got lazy and my attention was elsewhere, so there's probably like 3 or 4 days over the 4th of July and the weekend that I didn't spray them. And yesterday evening when I come out to check on everything, I found a lot of squash bugs in the front. I'll show you those squash and zucchini down there. And then I just found a couple back here, so I was like, okay, I shouldn't have laid down on my pepper spray, so I sprayed everything good. I may need to do it again today, though, since it rained last night, but that's okay. I'll spray again if I can keep the rain. What I found yesterday, though, when I was spraying, especially in the front, was as I sprayed it, and then I went back through the squash just looking to see if I seen any more, a lot of them, that spray brought them up to the top, and so then I could just, you know, take them out, if you will. Anyway, so I'm really pleased with this part of the garden, and I'll give you a closer look now. In this first little bed that Katie made, she done such a good job. I love the rocks. The poppies are about finished blooming. There's a few still blooming there on the end. And then I planted, Katie let me plant, didn't care that I planted that red coneflower in here. And then some salvia. It's doing good, holding on, but not blooming. And then the coneflower that I accidentally pulled up from one of the beds on the bank. It's finished blooming, but I'm just going to leave it like it is and hope that it reseeds itself there. Now back in the back, you can see those little things coming up. I couldn't resist, of course, planting some. The day that I planted the red coneflower and the salvia, I went ahead and put some seeds back there. I can't even remember now exactly what I planted. I'll have to go back and watch my video or just wait for them to grow. But at least they're up, and hopefully if we continue to keep them watered or if our rain increases, we'll get to see some flowers there before fall. I've been super excited about these coneflowers this year. I planted them last year, and so I didn't have to plant them this year. You can see they've kind of took over my herb bed, though. That may not have been the best place to put them. But I used to grow coneflowers every year. This has been like 15 years ago probably, and they did so good. And then suddenly I couldn't grow them anymore. And the ones I did in those days, they would kind of reseed themselves and spread, you know, and it just, I don't know what happened, if something changed, if I just let them get away from me and then didn't, you know, care for them enough when I replanted them. But I've really enjoyed these and really been so excited, other than the fact that I have took up my whole end here of my herb bed. They've kind of crowded out the parsley and the basil that I planted back there. And there's some dill growing that I hope I get to make some pickles with. I've got some dill up front too, but it's just teeny tiny right now. Hopefully it'll grow some and I can use it. And then this end is just huge. Back there in the back is the hyssop. I wanted to move that into a different, one of the raised beds Matt got me for Christmas, but we didn't end up doing that. Granny being in the hospital and different things, it just never did happen. But it's just lovely like it was last year. You can see the blooms, and the bees just love it. They just go crazy over it. They're just always, I can't believe I don't see any on it right now because they're always just covered. It's just covered in bees. And Betty told me it would be like that. It's really, really a beautiful plant, hyssop. Then nestled in below it is lemon balm, and then also the clary sage. It's been blooming. It needs to be cut back now. It's just kind of getting droopy. And I've been using the lemon balm in my kefir water, but I can't use that much. I do need to get a piece of it, though, and take to Corey. Somehow her lemon balm died, which is like almost an impossibility. You'll know if you've ever grown lemon balm. It usually, you've got to worry about it taking over instead of dying. These cucumbers here on the end, on this part right here, are the Arkansas Little Leaf, and they're just now beginning to produce, but they were planted later. I had to replant them. The first ones didn't really come up, so I'm excited to see that they're producing. I picked one or two yesterday, but that rain, see what it does for you? There's another one needs to be picked this morning. On this end was the Sumter, and so far it's produced really good for us. We've been picking a lot of cucumbers off of it, and the plants look really good. And then on the end was one that our friend Solly shared with us, but I've not really seen it have any cucumbers unless I'm not thinking that they, or they're not looking like what I thought they would. I thought he told me they were a white cucumber, so I'll have to see about that. Although this took longer, the nasturtiums are finally beginning to flow out of the beds. It's just took longer this year because it's been so dry, but they are really lovely. Over on the other side of the arch, this is on this end, we have the Boston pickling cucumber, and they've just not done as good as they usually do for us. You can see they're barely, I don't know, maybe they've grown 3 foot up the cattle panel, and they're producing here and there, but not a whole lot. Although now that I'm just standing at the perfect position to see down in there among the nasturtiums, I see a great old big cucumber that I've missed probably the last 4 times I've picked cucumbers. Then on this end is our silver slicers, and again, they're producing, but they kind of look pitiful, even though the squash bugs are not eating them this year since the pepper sprays work, and they still just don't look that great. Maybe the pepper spray's making them look kind of stunted, or it could be just the lack of rain. Over on this side, the silver slicers look better. They look better where they've actually flowed out into the onions there and growing, and I'm just letting them do that. And, you know, we have been watering them some, the cucumbers and the things back here, like I said, but there's just nothing that does your plants good like real rain. You know, you can water all the time, and then it can rain, and it's just amazing the difference real rain makes. I think Binks is after a little mouse we seen run out of the greenhouse. The flowers back here are doing better since I moved them and I changed positions with the petunias there. They've already looked better and already started kind of trying to bloom again. You can see that pink one, so I'm glad I moved them and changed where they were at. The dahlias have not bloomed yet, but I'm excited about seeing them. The little pot of basil is looking fantastic, and then the calendula there has got blooms ready to bust open, so that'll be, maybe in the next 2 or 3 days I'll get to see them. The little nasturtiums down there in that square container have not done as good, and it's partly the rain, lack of rain, and but we have watered them. Mostly they've not done good because Mr. Binks likes to dig them up, so that's mainly the reason that they're kind of looking pitiful. This pot of nasturtiums and calendula is looking great. Those calendulas, the bloom is not as large as those over there, but they do have little buds down in there I can see, so hopefully they're going to bloom for us too. And that nasturtium should continue to bloom and maybe flow out the bag there. That's going to be really pretty when it does. The gazinias and the candy tuft's kind of holding its own. The candy tuft looks like it's about to bloom though. It's got some little buds too. All of our potato plants have died back. We've not harvested all of them. These two on the end, though, this one and the one over there, you can see the plants are missing. All the potatoes are missing, too. We've eaten them all. The ones by the greenhouse back through there, we've not harvested any of those, but we need to. Remember, a few weeks ago, I took all my strawberries out of my green stalk. That's a sad story I'll tell you about in a minute. But I replanted it with some nasturtiums and some basil, and I think some thyme. The thyme come up and then died, and the basil, though, is still living, and you can see the nasturtiums are doing great. There's the little pocket with the basil. It's doing pretty good, too. And in some of the pockets, nothing come up in them. I don't know if I used nasturtium seed that I had, I had saved from last year's flowers, so maybe the seed was bad, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it just didn't for whatever reason they didn't come up, but there is a lot of them that did, and I know that's going to be really lovely once they cascade down with their flowers. Malabar spinach is climbing its way up, getting higher each day. Some of Katie's wild apricots are growing right through the middle of it too, which is typical. That's usually what happens, but they seem to grow pretty good together. Even with the dry weather, Matt's Cherokee purples, I just don't think they've ever looked this pretty. They're just beautiful. They're so lush and got tomatoes all over them. Matt's just waiting with bated breath for one to get ripe. I see a red one back there. I don't know if it's totally ripe, but he needs to investigate it. So this is the sad story of the strawberries. They all died, all the ones I put in here. And I did keep them watered. I watered them every day, every evening. I watered them thoroughly, and they just died anyway. I think it might have been because I cut them back so hard. It might be that it was just the wrong time to transplant them. I'm not sure, but they're all dead, so not one lived, even though I did really try. I do have the strawberries still in the grow bags over there, so not right now, of course. I'm not going to try it again, but maybe I will try to move them over here, or maybe I'll just have to start with brand new plants. The flower bed over here against the house that I've worked so hard on this year is looking better. It's looking better all the time. The plants that we planted recently that we got from Betty and Pat, they're doing good. They're holding on. And then the ones we planted before that, I planted the lantana and stuff. They're actually beginning to look like they're filling out a little bit. So hopefully by cold weather, it'll fill in some. I know next year Katie's poppies that did so good, they're going to fill in a lot of it for me. But I'm pleased with how it's doing so far. I keep thinking the marigolds at least should, spring up and get bushy and start blooming, but they've not done that yet. This huge overflowing bed of tomatoes is where our tomatoes are. They just look great. They're just hanging full. Each plant has got just tons of tomatoes on them. They're not actually getting ripe yet, but I know they soon will be. The ones that we've been enjoying so far are the little orange ones from David and Carolyn, and they are so, so good. But I can't wait to taste the black cherry and the other ones that we planted here. I'm really excited about all of them. I love tomatoes. Matt calls them yard snacks, but they're so good. This little round bed is our gypsy peppers, and they've just been producing like crazy. They did years ago when Matt and I grew them. They did the same, and it's been many years. I just somehow forgot about growing them till I seen them at Wayne's feed store this year, and they're doing just like they did before for us. They're just producing like crazy, and they are a sweet pepper. They're really tasty. They've got a good flavor, and they're very prolific. That little one down there in the middle is not a gypsy. It is like I think it was just an orange bell pepper, and it's not really doing anything since I first planted it. It might have grew an inch. It ain't grew very much, though. Our other container raised bed of peppers are doing good, too. I see one little pepper down there growing, and these are the ones I can never remember the name of, something horn from Betty and Pat, and they are a sweet pepper, too. And then the ones down there that's way smaller, those are just bell peppers that I think I picked up at Walmart. And they've got blooms on them, and they're looking better than the one over there, so hopefully they'll have some peppers. But Betty said we would really, really love this sweet pepper there, and that it was really prolific. So they've grew unbelievable since we first planted them here. They're really tall now compared to the tiny ones that we planted, so hopefully they're going to start producing for us, and we'll have some really good peppers. This is our more established grapevine, and it's just hanging full of grapes. I don't know the variety of it because Miss Cindy's friend Solly shared it with us many, many years ago. But it's like a purple grape, and it's tasty, and it makes great jelly and great juice. I'm really excited about this little grapevine. You can see there's just one little grape on it, though. There's a few more right there. But this is a Scoopernong, and I just hope it takes off and does good because I discovered that is my favorite grape by far. Our blueberries are continuing to get ripe, and we've enjoyed them so much. And the ribbons that we put in them seems to be helping with the blue jays, keeping them scared off. Matt's also tried to scare some of them off himself, but so far we've kind of protected the blueberries for this year. Matt and I both just can't believe how much better the tomatoes look down here. I think it's that we put the bone meal, and then we put chicken compost, and then we put mushroom compost. So either the combination of all that, or one of them, which we wouldn't know which one, really made a huge difference. They're growing by leaps and bounds. Some of them have reached the top of the cattle panel even, and the color is just so much better, so much better. As far as ripe tomatoes, though, again, the little Tommy Toe from David and Carolyn, there's one of those down here, and they've been the ones that are getting ripe that we've been eating on. Not many of them, but 3 or 4. And then we have our first German Johnson that's getting ripe. We're really excited about it. Me and Matt may fight over that one, or we'll have to share it, I guess. Both of us taste a little bit of it and see if it's as good as we remember from the ones we grew many, many years ago. We just quit growing them because they didn't produce very much. And so far, that plant has 1 tomato on it, so that may be the same thing that happens to us again, trying it again this time. I planted a row of zinnias back here, old maids, behind the tomatoes, and there's the first one blooming. Isn't it lovely? So pretty. I think old maids are pretty at any stage, though. Look at that, even that when they're not budded out. Isn't that just intricate and beautiful? I just love them. And there's one at another stage, just about kind of to start unfurling, and that's beautiful too. They're just such a pretty flower and easy to grow. This part of our garden down here has probably suffered the most from the lack of rain, and it's because it gets the most sunshine. It gets full day of sunshine down here. Most parts of it. Down there, not as much, but this part right behind me does. So it's probably suffered the most from it. Our beans, we had our first major picking, and hoping that there'll be another flush of it, even though with the dry weather. Our okra, which loves the dry heat, doesn't bother it at all. It's doing good. I'll give you a closer look at it. Our beets are continuing to look good. I don't know how big of a beet is on the bottom of them, but the tops of them look good. And the beans look fairly good. The back row, I think, looks better than this front row of the rattlesnake beans, which is unusual, but I think it looks better, more lush. And then I've been kind of every once in a while spraying the pepper spray on the beans to try to prevent the little yellow bug that gets on them sometimes, and it's at least maybe held them at bay, but I think there's something else eating the leaves down at the bottom, so we're going to have to investigate that and see what we can do about it. It's raining on me. I think it's just rain from the trees, but isn't that glorious to have that water? So our okra is just looking fantastic because, of course, it loves this kind of weather. It's about, I guess most of the plants are about, I don't know, shin high, knee high, something like that. But you can see they're already starting to bloom. So probably in another week or so, we should have our first mess of okra. And right in front of the okra, you can see here's our row of beets. I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited about the beets. I need to, I guess, start pulling them up and see if they've actually got some beets under there. I see 1 or 2, though, sticking out, so I know at least some of them did grow a beetroot. But they looked good, and I'm just excited that I grew beets. And now I know, always plant them when the dogwood trees bloom. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. This is the back row of beans that I think looks just better than the rattlesnakes. Although I see a bug. I see a squash bug right there on that one. Oh, how dare you. So definitely I need to, wonder now I'm going to have to look at every bean now to see if I see any more, but maybe that was just a random one. Usually the squash bugs don't get on the beans, but maybe I've drove them to the beans because I've kept them off of the squash. Exciting, though, to see the growth in the beans just since Matt and I last picked them. We were examining these beans in the back and didn't really see any much growth, but I see some butter beans there growing. I seen some more of the mother beans down there where I saw the squash bug. A lot more butter beans right here. They're just hanging full. So unbelievable that those have grew since Matt and I were out here last. So this is the squash and zucchini plants that I got from Betty and Pat back a good while ago, and they've been producing for us. We've been getting squash, we've been getting zucchini, and I've been trying to keep them sprayed with the pepper spray to ward off the squash bugs. Like I said, I took a few days off, and then last night when I come out to spray, I found a lot of squash bugs down here. So I definitely need to come back tonight and make sure that I got rid of most of them last night, and especially since it rained. Although if I have to spray them every day and it rains every night, that'll be okay with me because we're just such a deficit for rain. But the plants overall are looking good. This lower part of the garden, we didn't really utilize all of it this year like we usually do. Pretty much you can see my winter squash right here. From there all the way down to the blueberry bushes, we didn't plant anything. We've got some compost there. Matt's got his four-wheeler parked right there from this morning. But we just didn't plant anything. We just never did get it done. Partially that was because we run out of time. Part of it was because now we've got the big garden, so we put some of the stuff that we might have put here, we put down there. Some extra squash and zucchini, some watermelons, those kind of things. But this part back here, you can see the winter squash is looking good. There goes Mr. Binks. He's always on the chase for something. And then the carrots and the parsnips are still looking really great. I hope again that they're doing something under the ground where I can't see, but I'm really pleased so far with how everything's looking down here. So the winter squash is beginning to send out its little runners there. Pretty soon they'll have since we didn't plant anything, they'll have a lot of places to sprawl out as they start setting their squash. The carrot tops look great. They're really full and lush. The parsnip tops look good too, and that'll be the first time I've ever grown parsnips if there is a parsnip below them. Let me walk over there and let you see them. There's the row of parsnips. They look kind of puny down there towards the bottom, but at least the tops are growing, and you can continue to see my weedy, terrible flower bed there that I've never managed to get cleaned out yet. This row between the carrots, this is the second time trying to plant stuff in it, so I've just got some seeds of flowers. I planted some dill. I've got the flowers that I got from Betty and Pat, the little dwarf sunflowers and the marigolds. So I'm still hopeful that they'll kind of take off. They've not yet, but hopefully they will. A lot of you have been asking about the corn down at the big garden, so here's the corn. Some of it looks fantastic, and some of it not so much. I know it's the dryness has affected it too. You can see over there in the back, closest to the creek, probably closest to the moisture, the corn is way taller than I am, and then up here on the front, where it's the farthest away from the moisture, it's not. I don't know, not even up to my shoulders, I guess. So more of a little small stalk of corn there. And all of the corn, the really tall and the smaller corn, is beginning to tossle now. So whatever it's going to do for sure. There's some bees already working this one. Oh, I just love it. I love the sound of the bees in the corn. So only time will tell how much corn we'll get from the garden. One day I'll come down here and I'll think, oh my goodness, it just doesn't look like it's doing any good. And then this morning I'm thinking, hey, it looks pretty good. It looks like a cornfield. That's what it's supposed to look like. So we'll just have to see how the dry weather affected it. You can really see when I walk over here to these rows that are closer to the creek how tall the corn is. Huge difference from those front rows. The beans that Matt planted for Corey for Mother's Day, the deer ate them down at the bottom. We've done some things to ward them off, and that's helped some. You can see she's got beans, a few beans there, just little beans, but growing, so she'll at least get to pick maybe a mess. And then down at the bottom where the deer had ate the leaves, they're beginning to come back out. And here's the watermelons that I planted down here. They're getting pretty big. They're getting almost as big as a soccer ball, almost. One or two of them's that big. Some of them are smaller. Some more over here. Some more little ones growing. Here's our big long row of potatoes. They're looking good. Some of them still just beginning to bloom. We planted these much, much later than we did the ones up at home, up at the house that are already finished and died back. And then the sad part of the garden is these two rows in between the corn there and the potatoes. That's where we planted Granny's peanut beans. and a little short row of butter beans, and then some okra. The okra is really just beginning to come up. It's probably maybe 3 inches high, so it's not really doing anything yet. But the sad part is that the deer have been nibbling on the peanut beans and on the butter beans, on both of them. On this side of the potatoes, we planted a long row of squash and zucchini, and they are just now beginning to bloom. So hopefully we'll have some squash and zucchini down here soon. I hope you enjoyed walking around the garden with me. Overall, me and Matt, we really can't complain. Even though we've not had much rain, things are still doing pretty good overall, if you think about it, the big picture, and that's what you have to do if you're a gardener. But we're still getting cucumbers. We've got lots of tomatoes that just need to ripen. Our potatoes did good for us, the ones we've harvested so far. The beans, so far is doing pretty good, and just a lot to be thankful for, even though we've not had much rain, and we certainly need more. I'm so thankful, though, so thankful to the Lord that He sent rain overnight. Every little bit will help, and like I said, rain does something that watering just can't do. It just makes such a huge difference, and hopefully that our systems are changing, and we'll be able to get a little bit more rain in the coming days. I hope so. So you always think as a gardener, things that I'm already thinking about. Someone left a comment and said something about what they were going to do next year, and I said, yeah, I'm already thinking about it too. I'm already thinking about what I want to do next year. I want to definitely plant all those flowers I've tried so hard. Part of it is that I should have planted them earlier, and I didn't get to because, life happens. But I hope that I can do that. I'm going to make it a real effort to plant more flowers, but do it earlier so they have time to really get established in case it does turn out to be a dry year again and they're not trying to germinate and actually start growing under those conditions. So, that's one thing that I'm already dreaming about next year. I'm thinking about, I'm so glad the pepper spray worked. So I'm thinking I definitely need to grow a lot more hot peppers next year so that I can use them in my spray. I've used up my supply of the cayennes that I've dried the last 2 years. They're gone. I've used them all. So when I make my next batch, I'll have to use, I guess, just store-bought cayenne pepper or something, or go buy me some hot peppers. I'm going to have to do that. So I'm thinking about those things. As you might imagine, me and Matt both are thinking about the deer and what to do about that. It's not so bad up here at our house, I think, because we're just constantly in and out of the house and in and out, and there's lots of, talking and people coming and going and those kind of things. So we've not had that big of a problem up here. But those areas where it's really quiet, like down there at the big garden, where there's not people going back and forth all day and people are not out in that area, they've also nibbled, I think I told you that in a previous video, but Granny's peas, again, in her backyard. There's not really a lot of noise or people going back and forth. So we're going to have to think seriously about that. Matt's already thinking about, building a fence or whatever, whatever he comes up with. So we're definitely thinking about that for next year. That's the way of a gardener, though. If you garden, whether you grow food for your family or maybe you just grow flowers, you're always thinking about the next. I guess life is kind of like that, though. You get something accomplished. Maybe you're redoing your house and you get your bathroom just like you want it, and then you're like, okay, now I want to do the bedroom, or I want to do the living room, or whatever. So I guess life is like that too. Whatever it is that you're interested in, you're kind of always thinking about, how can I improve this and how can I make it better. Definitely, though, if you're a gardener, you understand that. Even with the pitfalls of the squash bugs and the deer nibbling the beans and the peas down in the big garden and at Granny's, it's still so rewarding. It's frustrating. I understand that. I get frustrated. I got so frustrated last year with the squash bugs till I finally just basically give up and just like, you can have them. You can have my watermelon plants. You can have the cucumbers. You can just have them. I know it's so frustrating, and I can't imagine living in a place where people have shared that with me, even like in a suburb kind of area, a more populated area, that they're not necessarily trying to grow food, but they can't grow flowers and things because the deer eat them. I know, I just can't imagine. That's so frustrating, so frustrating. And I hope and pray that I never get to that point where they just devour everything and I have to just quit. That would be really sad. But for where me and Matt are at right now, even with those disappointments of the, like I said, the squash bug, the beans bugs, those are mostly the two bugs we deal with, and then the deer now nibbling on stuff. It's just still such a rewarding thing to grow food for your family, to watch plants just come alive and thrive. Where I'm sitting right now, I can see the cucumbers, to know that I planted those little seeds and the Lord let them grow and flourish, and now they're bloomed, and I can see a little cucumber there. That's just such a rewarding thing. And I like to encourage people. Of course, everyone can't garden on the scale that Matt and I are gardening. I know that you don't have the room, you're not able, you don't have the time, all those kind of things. But even if you just have a little pot full of, if it's a flower, if it's lettuce, whatever it is, it just really does something for your soul to see things grow. Part of it for me too is like the tradition of growing in my family, of making a garden every year. Pap, certainly in the days when he was a boy, they had to do that or face, the wolf of hunger at the door. There was no choice. Everybody had to do that. But then he really enjoyed the growing and the eating and the putting up and all that, and him and Granny both. And then because of that, then I inherited that from them. That's where I got my love of that. And I think back to the, like really discouraging about the deer and the squash bugs or anything like that you're fighting. But then I think back to the things that Pap, had to deal with, whether it was, some kind of bug getting in the beans or something like that, or little turtles coming along and taking a bite out of the squash or the zucchini. And, even like this year, I'm bemoaning the fact that we're not having thunderstorms like we usually do. But those thunderstorms, they do, you get the rain, but then you run the risk of other things happening, like at the stage of our corn is now, where it's tall and mostly beautiful. Most of it's tall. The front row's not as much. But what the risk is then is one of those thunderstorms come through with a lot of wind and just blows it over. And I've seen that happen to Pap a lot over my lifetime, And a lot of people try to kind of prop it up and do those things. Pap always said it'll either stand back up and make or it won't. So he didn't really try to do anything about it. But I think about that perseverance because, you'd think, well, I've spent all that time, all that work, all that, and, growing that much corn, and it would have even been more corn than that in Pap's time. That's a lot of work. And then you think one storm just come along and lay it all over. How discouraging that had to be. But you know what Pap did the very next year? He planted corn. He did it again. I think that's just there's a perseverance in there to be admired. And some people might say, no, I think that's silly. You spent all that time and work and energy when you could just go to the store and buy it from somebody else and not have to go through that. And I certainly understand that. I can see that. But for me, and I know for Pap, it's about the growing, it's about the trying, it's about the persevering, the self-sufficiency. It's about all those things that really instill, I guess, in you an iron will that you're just going to keep trying in the face of whether it's squash bugs like I fight today or the deer or whatever it is in your life. Again, I hope you enjoyed seeing how our gardens are doing. I'm always glad when you stop by to help me celebrate Appalachia.